Hi, my name is Dr. Nikki Greaves and I'm a Consultant Clinical Psychologist. I work with young people with autistic spectrum disorders to find ways to regulate their emotions using cognitive behaviour therapy techniques. CBT is basically where thoughts, feelings and behaviours are all connected. And the work that I do is to help young people with autism to have more balanced thinking and to find helpful things to do in order to feel calm. With the current Covid-19 lockdown, I was wondering if it'd be helpful to share some conversations that parents and carers and professionals could have with young autistic people to support them at this difficult time. The first thing I was thinking was just how to explain to somebody about the current lockdown and why perhaps they're not able to follow their preferred interests, which of course can be very stressful and very difficult. I know that there's a range of resources online for social stories and other visuals to support understanding. And I'm also thinking that some other conversations that you could have are things like using their interests. So I know a lot of young people really like Thomas the Tank Engine, and so you could have a conversation about the idea that the controller has had to make this decision to support Thomas and friends to be safe at this time. And very unusual, they've had to stay in their sheds today, each in their own individual shed, but that they can video link each other so they can still talk to each other. Maybe they can talk about things that they might want to do after lockdown, or things they used to enjoy doing, or the things that they're already doing at the moment in their sheds, maybe gaming or something like that. Also, I think making that conversation to be something that's a decision made by the government. It's not a demand that you, a parent, are placing on your child. Is really helpful because it just removes that sort of potential for conflict between you and your child, and it frees up a space to provide the sort of emotional support that the young person might really need at this time. So it's a place then to sort of validate how really difficult it is for them, and that you can really see how hard the situation is for them and how well they're doing to manage at this time. Coming on to thinking about emotions, again, expressing emotions, knowing words for emotions is something very, very difficult for young autistic people. And there's a range of fantastic visuals that you could use at this time to help them express themselves about Covid-19 and about the lockdown. You can find them online. This is one from the Carrie Dunn-Buron and Mitzi Curtis incredible 5-point scale. And you can use these just to ask how your child is feeling. They may start the conversation, they may talk about the virus, and you can then say, just wondering how that's making you feel. So you can ask open questions, or you can say, it looks like you're having a tough day with the lockdown, just wondering how you're feeling about that. And it can be a really helpful way for them to let you know through words rather than through maybe some challenging behaviours. This is another one that's really, really helpful. It's the zones of regulation, and that's by Lair Kuipers. Again, I would think you could find these resources online. It can be another sort of challenge moving on from that young people with an autism spectrum disorder can have some very strong feelings, very all or nothing, often very negative feelings, much more sort of negative and extreme feelings than many of us would have, and that's obviously very distressing for them. And it's how to kind of support them in this time where there may be some real anxieties around the virus. I know some young people I was working with were really worried that it was going to be very serious for them, and they were very frightened. So it can be really helpful to support them with more balanced thinking. This is something that can be quite a challenge for somebody with autism. And so it can be really good to support them perhaps with some of your own balanced thoughts. So the idea that everybody's working together at this time. Humans are fantastic at finding answers to things, and everyone's really working hard to get this sorted, and that everyone's working hard to keep everybody safe, and that's why being in the lockdown is so important. You could also use someone's interests. So if they really like a particular game, you can sort of chat about how much time and effort and energy and lots of people working together it took, and they built this amazing game. And in just the same way, humans are working together and building fantastic things that are going to help this situation with COVID-19, and just how well we're all doing by supporting them to make this happen. Another way of supporting balanced thinking is that sometimes it can be unhelpful for that young person to spend lots of time on the negative thinking. They can get sort of caught into it and not be able to sort of get out of it, not be able to quite hear those balanced thoughts just yet. It can be helpful perhaps to say, those thoughts are really unhelpful. They're putting you up to, what you're telling me is it's putting you up to 4 or 5 on the scale, and it's really, really helpful to be helping you to be down at a 1, especially at this time. And so I think we're not going to spend too long on those thoughts. You can perhaps, if they feel a real need to, you can perhaps reduce it to a few minutes, use a timer or something like that. And what can be really helpful is building up a range of helpful things that they can do instead, and using that as a visual like this one. You could just write it down on a piece of paper though. It could just be something like, green zone activities, and you just write them down together. And the more they can recognise that they have skills in this situation, the better. So this is somebody who really likes listening to a particular style of music, so you might put a particular style of music in, or they like particular movies that they like watching, or online gaming activities that they like to do. This is somebody who likes cooking, and then you could bring in a few extra things like, well, we're going to go for a walk once a day, but I'd love, that's a great time for you to tell me about the thing you're really interested in. And trying to put a range of things, if you can, is fantastic. So some exercise is brilliant, something that's arranged of activities is fabulous. But these are difficult times, so whatever is possible is fantastic. That brings me on to my final point, which is just to really appreciate how amazingly well you're doing at this time. It's so challenging for everybody, and as a parent or carer for somebody with an autism spectrum disorder, and for the young person themselves, it's a really, really huge challenge, and you're doing fantastically well. I think it's really important to really to have conversations about that. So to say how well you're doing, to really praise your child and say you're noticing how fantastically well they're doing, is really, really helpful at this time. And I think just to kind of keep that in mind, any small thing that goes well is a huge achievement, is a huge celebration, and that's the important thing to keep in mind at this time. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope these ideas can be helpful to you all at this time. Thanks very much.